Hello and welcome to the weekly review here on Teachers Talk Radio. This week, we're going to be talking about transphobic bullying has been made worse by government guidance, as reported by Vice News. A remark reform, nearly 24,000 GCSE grades changed after remarks. And the DfE attendance push. I'm sure if you are online, you will have seen some of their adverts going out about sending sick kids to school. Now, we're going to go straight into our first story, and that is this article from Vice.com, where they are talking about some criticism of the guidance put out by the Department for Education with the headline, "Children are too scared to go to school because of transphobic bullying." They quote, or they paraphrase, the UK government delayed guidance for schools in December 2023 that advised teachers, according to Vice, that they can block students from socially transitioning at school, misgender students, and out any child's transgender status to their caregivers. It has put teachers in a difficult position. We did want guidance. Is this the kind of guidance we wanted? I'm going to go to Hannah first.
I think it's a fine line. From somebody who's had quite a lot of trans students through the years. I've been at two schools that are quite well known in the area for being comfortable with trans students, and quite often they come to our school because they know that they'll be accepted. But at the same time, my previous school 6 years ago, when we got one of our students, it was the first time they'd had a fully trans student, and having to kind of deal and understand all the legislation behind that. She went on to go onto The Voice and went onto will.i.am's team and nationally said it in front of everyone, and I couldn't be prouder of her and everything she's achieved. But that's down to her having a really safe environment at school where she can be herself, and kind of homophobic bullying and things are really tackled, as well as transphobia. And it's really important that we have that place where they can be comfortable, they can test out kind of where they want to be before, because telling your parents is a really, really big deal. And I think it's that kind of idea. I don't think, I'm kind of at the line where changing register names and things without parent permission and things like that, and student emails and names and things like that, I do think if we're getting to that point, then parents need to be involved in that conversation. But quite often there can be a lot of coaching involved with the students before they feel comfortable enough to speak to their parents. And I think they need to feel comfortable. It needs to be a safe environment. We don't need to affect these students' mental health more than they already are going through this situation.
And Catherine, this is a really nuanced and careful, complicated situation that schools and teachers find themselves in. Was the guidance from the Department for Education ever going to be up to scratch with such a complicated situation?
It's extremely complicated, and my view, and I'm an RE teacher, so I've kind of got to pitch my view around the issue of harm. There's always, I think it's going to be very difficult to avoid harm to somebody. So let me just explain what I mean. If there's some students who are genuinely, gender dysmorphia, all of those things, and we do nothing, then there's harm. If we allow people to sort of social transition, when later on they come to regret it, which we also know does happen sometimes, then we've caused harm. The difficulty we have as educators is we don't know which people are who. We have no way of knowing which one. If we do nothing, will there be harm? If we do something, will there be harm? And so I just think it's such a sticky situation. And I think you're right, the guidance can never really account for those kinds of unknowns, really. But on bullying, absolutely, that should be challenged. That should be, that should not be allowed. It should not be excused, because that, as Hannah says, we don't want to add to the distress of our young people.
And John, your thoughts on this one?
Well, absolutely. I agree that schools welcome guidance. Guidance is something you think, well, of course we want consistency. I want expert advice. I want someone who's had time to look in to advise me to look into this. I'm a teacher. I'm busy. This isn't that. And guidance, the word guidance is often used as a form of kind of passive aggression. It says, well, here's the guidance because we don't think you'll be doing it right. And this is saturated with a view of transgender issues that is fearful. You need to be afraid. Inform the parents. Be aware of this. Don't assume that they will be. It's instructions on which has behind it a view of transgender, which is really quite dangerous, really. What you want is what Hannah said. You want schools. Be comfortable. Be aware of safety. Be aware of this. Be aware of what Catherine said, that you can do harm. But of course, that's going to apply to a lot of things that people do in schools. Schools can do a lot of harm without meaning to, and it's a tightrope we walk along on all sorts of other subjects, other areas other than this. It's a difficult one. Want proper guidance. This isn't proper guidance. This is akin to a moral panic. The guidance a few years ago would have been different. The guidance in the future will be different because this guidance reflects a government that is saying not to us as teachers, not to students as transgender students, but to the public out there. Really, don't worry, parents. You'll be told if anything dodgy is going on in the school. And that, unfortunately, is the mood of the times.
Well, really tough, and an ongoing debate there. If you do follow us on Twitter, on Instagram, or on LinkedIn, join the conversation. I'm sure we'll be talking about it for a long time, and we're ready for our next story. And just before we get on with it, I do want to give a massive thank you to our sponsor for this show, which is, of course, John Catt Educational, publishing professional development books and resources to support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Have you checked out their latest releases? Use the code JCTTR2324 for 20% off your order. Don't miss out. Visit johncattbookshop.com and explore their full range of titles and advance your own professional development today. Happy reading. Well, a story that grinds my gears ever so slightly, this one. It's remark reform. There have been nearly 24,000 GCSE grades changed after remarks. In the core subjects, this accounts for about 3.4% of the actual entries. Now, this story comes to us from the TES magazine and because of a report by Ofqual of the reviews of marking and moderation, ROMM, for the summer 2023 examination series. Children not getting the grades that they have earned. Hannah, what are your thoughts on this one?
I mean, this happens a lot in art. I think art as well is very subjective, so it can be very different. Like, you can really spend all that time with those students to really understand their process and everything they've put into it, and somebody else can walk in the room and be like, "Don't get it, nah," and mark them down. And it seems to be happening more and more. And as well, like looking at all the chats online and stuff, there's people that have marked for 10 years and never ever been marked down that have been marked down. And it seems to be this inconsistency. It very much seems like a roulette as to what moderator you get as to whether your marks stick or not. I mean, I did have a lovely moderator this year, but she was a food tech teacher coming and marking our art, textiles, photography, and 3D design. So from that respect, I mean, like she said that I was a little bit lenient, and I thought I marked really strict, and I'm a moderator. So it really is kind of, especially in art and design, very wide and open, and it seems to be that it's just this roulette as to, depending on who you get, as to whether your marks will stick or not. And that anxiety of the impact on those students, that you've done everything you possibly can to get them to that point, I think it'd just be down to somebody's viewpoint in a room.
And I think we've got a graph that we can put up just about some of these are big swings that we're talking about. This is the number of exams by subject with a grade change of 2 or more after review. So these are big swings, things that can potentially, make a difference to what courses you go on to in the future. Some of these swings, of course, they might be across grade boundaries that are really important. But English literature there, a massive amount. English language, art and design, as mentioned by Hannah, and as we move down there as well. Now, Catherine, what are your thoughts on this? Is it affecting? Do you think there's some subjects are harder than others? And what about access to these remarks? Because not everyone will be challenging their grade.
That's it. And I think, you know, the pointy elbowed middle class parents perhaps push more for them and have more resources. And I work in a grammar school. We certainly do pursue a lot. We've had particular problems with English remarks because a lot of our students write in extremely sophisticated ways with lots of flair. And I start to think about, you know, whether you end up having to teach to the test to make sure that the students put the signposting in for what they're doing, almost provide like a meta narrative that directs the examiner to where they're doing this skill or that particular demonstrating that particular competence. So yeah, I think that access to the regrades can be really, really challenging. And I know that we always get plenty back which have been regraded and gone up. But there's a cost to that, and not everyone can afford it, and not all schools, you know, push for it. You know, perhaps we have the very high expectations of our students because of our context. Maybe there are other contexts where, you know, for complex reasons, the students are, you know, they get what we thought, well, that was a fair crack for them, and nobody challenges it, when actually there could be a marking issue which goes unnoticed.
And John, you know, there has been, I don't know if you remember back around the time, there was some issues around marking, issues around finding people to mark during the summer. You know, is this part of a bigger problem? Is, you know, the exam grading system fair and functional at the moment?
No to all of those. Is it a bigger problem? Or rather, yes to that. It is certainly a bigger problem. It's a problem fundamentally. It's a problem philosophically. It's a problem with the whole idea of exams. It's a problem with the way we do it historically and lately. Yeah, to your points, Catherine is right. Absolutely. It's arbitrary. The schools that can afford to put in lots of appeals, the schools that don't put in lots of appeals, the parents who push for lots of appeals and so on. That is an unfairness, an terrible, unjust unfairness. Anyone who's examined, it's a bit like if you're in a restaurant and the door flips open between, you know, having a nice time, it's a very pleasant restaurant, and the door flips open, you see the kitchens for a few moments and you wish you hadn't. Or if you've worked in a kitchen in a restaurant, you thought, well, I don't think I'll eat here in future. Anyone who's examined realizes what they're looking at is far from the ideal that we imagine goes on. A highly subjective process where expert people mull over each exam script. As people sit in exam rooms and they scribble away and they think, well, I wonder how long this sentence doesn't sound quite right. When this is read, I wonder whether they'll get it. You're going to be read very rapidly by someone under pressure who's poorly paid, probably isn't the best person to be marking it anyway. And they're going to be randomly checked by someone else in a similar situation. It's a highly arbitrary, poorly resourced system. And absolutely, it's unreliable to at least a grade either way. That's ordinary exams, not just remarks. Unreliable to a grade either way. And someone like Dennis Sherwood, who's campaigned on this and does webinars, has been a guest on my show and so on, has been exposing this for years. We don't like to hear it. People don't like to hear that. They want to think that their children are going to get judged properly. They like to think that they were judged properly, and so on. And as a society, most of us do all right. That's another thing. It's sort of a gaslighting thing. You know, we don't want to know because most of us do fine. You know, we come out, we go, well, I was close. I got my A. You don't want to hear that it's inaccurate one way, unreliable to one way or the other, because that casts doubt on the ones who succeed. And that is most of us. So it's a system in which we've all bought into because it works for most of us most of the time. Well, it's an outrageous system. We examine students too much. We examine students too often. We put them into the wrong kind of exams. So we examine subjects that really shouldn't be examined. The idea is point out that an art moderator can come up. I sat in an exam room once. Oh, sorry, experience an art moderator looking at a piece of art and saying, oh, I don't really get that, or something like that. I sat in an exam room once. I was examining in the middle years of my career, and we actually used to meet the other examiners. And sitting there in an examining, I thought, I'm doing examining. This is proper examining. We sat around the table, and they handed out some essays. Right, what do we think of this? One chap thought it was an A, another chap thought it was a D. They were all years of experience. And I thought, well, I don't know what I think of it now. And we realised what we were actually doing was convincing ourselves to mark with a similar kind of view of the chief examiner's view of the subject, revealing that it's highly subjective. Oh dear, where to start with how appalling exams are? We need, as a society, to say we examine too much, we examine in the wrong ways, and it's time to change it.
Now, talking a little bit here about some of the things that mentioned as well. We've had a message in from Brent Poland here that says hard up schools in deprived areas don't have the resources to challenge grades, more unfairness. And now this might be part, I don't know if we're seeing more challenges, are those challenges changing where they're coming from, but certainly we're in a high pressure system. Hannah, did you have something there?
Yeah, I'm just going to add in as well, because one of my friends, she marks English essays, and there's I don't know whether people have heard of the gold rush afterwards. So you get sent the allotted number to mark, and then you all mark those, but it's a ridiculous number that's really hard to do. And then whatever anybody doesn't get done, it goes into this pot, and then they release it to everybody, and then it's a gold rush that you get paid per number that you get done, and everybody tries and rushes and gets these last assignments done. And for me, I'm like, if your student falls in that gold rush, they're going to be like not necessarily marked as well as maybe the ones that were marked at the start. And I find that could potentially lead to unfairness, and maybe potentially this is where these falls in marking, that they're actually giving people a far bigger quota than what's manageable, and then it creates this kind of weird rush at the end when everyone's tired, trying to frantically mark them all before the deadline to try and earn some extra pennies. It just doesn't work. Like John said, the system just needs changing.
And but there will be within the, there will be some people who have a belief in themselves, I guess, or a belief in their students to challenge. But there will also be people, whether they be parents or schools or teachers or children, who believe that the examiner is right. They have a kind of inherent built-in trust where they think, no, they've said I deserve a level 5. Then a level 5 is what I deserve. They're right. They're the person who knows. John, you had something to say there?
Yeah, absolutely. People carry with them a narrative of their own lives, which says, oh, I didn't quite get the A, so I didn't go to that university. Oh, I didn't pass this particular GCSE, so I wasn't able to do this. And it changes the direction of their lives on what is, they imagine, their fault. If only they'd worked a little harder. If only they'd revised a little better. And their school will, of course, these days, the school will be covered with posters and things and strap lines saying, work hard, achieve, excellence, which imposes back on the students. It's all about you and how much effort you put in. It's not when it comes to exams. It's a con. You don't realise that, in fact, that you'll be marked. Your scripts will be marked differently on a different day by a different examiner. And just one last thing about the remarks. We think remarks are someone else, some more expert person casting their more expert mind over your particular script. They changed that some time ago. Remarks are in fact just a check on whether they got the numbers right, which makes it even more disgraceful that they changed them to that degree.
Now, it is something that Ofqual are apparently looking into. So hopefully we might have some updates. We might see some change, some kind of reform around the way this system works, because, from the comments there and the comments online that we're seeing, it is a bugbear for a lot of teachers out there at the moment. We're going to move on to our next story. Now, for our final story of today, we're talking about the Department for Education attendance push. Now, attendance has been in the headlines ever since the pandemic, and the government has a campaign to crack down on persistent absences, but it's facing a little bit of criticism. Some of those adverts we can show to you now. And you can see here, most of them kind of show a happy teenager, sometimes younger students that have had some kind of issue as why they potentially might not have attended school on that day. This morning, he had a stomachache, but look at him now. Some of them touch into mental health issues. This morning, she was worried about school, but look at her now. They've faced criticism particularly from mental health campaigners, but also from teachers. Should a child who is particularly unwell with a disease that potentially could spread to other students and teachers be coming into school just to push up our attendance figures? A tough line, but these adverts certainly have not gone down well with the teaching community. Hannah, what are your thoughts on this current push for attendance from the Department for Education?
I think it is that, like, we don't all want to get sick. If someone's got a stomach bug, we don't want them coming in school and spreading that. And then next week, there's hundreds of kids off. But I mean, I'm a mum. I'm guilty of they always feel a little bit rougher in the morning. Dose them up, send them in. If I have to go get them, I'll go get them. But resilience. But also, I just think it's pitched wrong. It's that I think the mental health is the area and is where the focus should be, and that's probably the reason that they're not attending. I think on my show before Christmas we discussed this, but the aim is to have one mental health officer in 50% of schools by 2025, but it needs to be one in every school before then. There needs to be the discussion as to why these kids aren't coming in, and maybe if it's a campaign where the poster was like, feeling really worried, why don't you try talking to somebody? Feeling really worried, why don't you go for a walk and see whether that can relieve it? Or try journaling and giving these kids strategies to combat their mental health. And there's not enough of that we're not giving the kids the tools to be able to overcome this. It's just this, you must go into school, and it's just the more you kind of try and make them, the less they're going to go into school.
Catherine, these do smack a little bit of a kind of toughen up approach.
Mhm.
You're feeling a bit down, toughen up and go into school. You're feeling a bit unwell, toughen up. And, it seems very much that way toned. Not at all like sort of Hannah was suggesting there of, seek help, seek guidance. Your school can support you. We know it's part of a bigger campaign. These are just the advertising of it, where we will have attendance hubs and specialist attendance officers going out to some schools. What are your thoughts?
I would say that until you are somebody that has to deal with somebody who's a school refuser and knows exactly the kinds of things that go on, where you're taking your child to A&E and you're reporting yourself to the social services, and your child can't get dressed, and your child is bigger than you and can become aggressive, then, until you know what it's like to deal with that reality, it's very easy to say, come on, toughen up. And, give the example of someone who wants to, we want to go for a run, don't really feel like it's cold, it's damp, and you feel better when you come back. And we can all imagine that, if you just grit your teeth and get on with it, then actually it wasn't so bad and you like it afterwards. We can all imagine and experience that. But I think there is a significant group of people who are having a really, really challenging time with their mental health and their SEND needs, which are unmet. And it's just until you've lived in that situation, I just think when I saw some of those adverts, I just thought, you haven't got a clue. You haven't got a clue about that situation.
John, maybe slightly patronizing adverts here. Are these going to support parents in any way?
Deeply, deeply patronizing. And although patronizing, I don't think the people that made them or the people that reviewed the making of them and said, that's a jolly good idea, that's a nice poster, realized just how patronizing it is, because it's a view of a world they don't understand. They don't understand the school refuser. They don't understand the difficulties of mental health in this country. They don't understand the high levels of poverty in this country and so on. They don't understand the effects of lockdown, all that lack of understanding. And they think we can be sorted out with pulling yourself together. Just pull yourself together. That's sort of like, it's a bit like telling the troops in the trenches to go over the top. Don't worry, pull yourself together, chaps. It'll be fine. It is deeply patronizing. It's misconceived. It's stupid. It's classist. It's very much the kids in the thing, all healthy young chaps, all smiling and happy, and off they go to school. And maybe that morning they had a bit of a tummy ache. And that's all you need to do. It's a suggestion that parents are somehow, and also, who's the audience for this? The audience for this are the readers of the Daily Mail who think that things aren't what they used to be. And people today let their kids get away with anything. And what we really need to do is a bit of, get them out the door, get them in the fresh air and so on. It's all nonsense and prejudice. Some years ago, there was a snow day, and I love snow days. I don't know if you've ever experienced a snow day where the phone rings in the morning or you hear on the radio, and the schools will be closed in your area. Yes, how wonderful. Anyway, there was a snow day. And so this wonderfully welcome, unexpectedly delightful day, I was watching the news, having gone out with my kids and thrown snowballs around and such like, come in, and there's a head teacher looking very annoyed. And he says, the schools in the area, we close the schools too quickly in this country. I want them in learning. I thought, well, if you want them in learning, they will forget 30 years from now, the students of today will forget all of your learning, mate. But they'll remember that snow day for the rest of their lives. There's not enough play. There's not enough fun. There's not enough joy in schools. And unfortunately, for about 30% of our kids or more, schools aren't nice. They're pressured. They see anxious teachers who are pressured in anxious schools where they are told it's all down to them, going back to our exam system, where they are responsible for their own personal success and failure. It's not nice to be at school, unfortunately, and we need to sort that out for a lot of kids. And it isn't because we aren't tough enough for them in the morning over their cornflakes.
And we've had a message in here from Tom HB. It says, I had a student whose mum kept them off school every year on their birthday. I don't know. I do worry sometimes that if one day missed is so important to education, what does that say about our schooling? Where are we at? What kind of pressure is that one day missed is so important? Anyway, it is about time for us to wrap it all up, and we're going to talk about our favourite shows of the week. I'll come to Hannah first of all. Your favourite show on Teachers Talk Radio this week?
I'm going for Tom's show. It was what to include and exclude from interviews. And he had a range of people calling, and it was really interesting. It was interesting seeing all the different points of view as well. Like the maths teacher wanted to keep the data test in, and kind of, whereas some other people was like really rated a student panel because it was nice to see how they interact with students. But there was a head teacher there as well. She was saying how she does a senior leadership task where all the candidates are in one room and asks them to explain their answer and then watches them debate it, which I love. It was very apprentice style. And even right at the end, it was great. He got two of them and made them do a mock interview and gave them ridiculous questions and saw how the answers were. So it's a great show if you've got interviews coming up or you're going to be in an interview. There's definitely some curveball questions in there that was discussed that was well worth having up your sleeve or having an answer for. So go have a listen at that one.
Fantastic. And I think that one was on Monday. Catherine, your favourite show of the week?
Yeah, so I'm going to talk about Thursday's Education Tonight with Brent and Adam. It was on absenteeism and attendance, which is part of what we've discussed today. And one of the things that I enjoyed about it was when they were looking at the guidance for NHS guidance for various illnesses and trying to, guess whether the advice was to stay at home or to go in. And they went through a range of different illnesses, and the guidance, to say the least, was complex and confusing. And as I was listening, I just thought, I always end up talking about women on this show, but there will be women in the teaching profession who are in the early stages of pregnancy and haven't told anyone yet. And for something like scarlet fever, if someone goes in, or hand, foot and mouth, and chicken pox, there's things we don't want to spread around the building. There's vulnerable people, not only pregnant women, but lots of people who don't want to take a disease home. So it's something that Hannah mentioned to be mindful of as well.
Fantastic. And if you want to catch up with that one, you can find it on Spaces on Twitter for the next 30 days and possibly on our website as well at ttradio.org/listenback. John, your show of the week?
I think we've lost him.
Oh, maybe we might have. John, are you with us? Oh, I don't know. Well, it might be just about that time where we need to finish off. Yes. And I'll give him one more chance. John, can you hear us?
Yeah, I'm back now. Yes, it went very...
There we go. Show of the week, please, John.
I can help because he was actually going to give it was going to be my show of the week.
There we go. Well, we might have to call it a day there.
Research practitioners. Developing teacher researchers. So
lovely stuff. Well, thank you, Hannah. Thank you, Catherine, and thank you, John. And we will see you all next week.